Hi there guys, my name's Chris, I'm 22 years old and
Hello Chris, I'm Silence, and this is my response to your video, Atheist to Christian, part 1 of 3. So let's see what you have to say.
very recently I became a Christian. If you told me this time 3 weeks ago, Chris, you'll be making a video about how you converted from atheism into Christianity, I'd have thought you mad, probably called the police on you.
If you told me 3 weeks ago I was going to make a video response to someone who converted to Christianity, I would have asked, why did I have to wait 3 weeks, and I wouldn't think about calling the cops on you.
I wouldn't have thought in a million years that this would ever happen to me. It's been a very confusing 2 or 3 weeks, and I just sort of like to tell my story, really, sort of explain how I've arrived at this conclusion. So for anyone who's sort of in my position at the moment and is having doubts about the way they see the world, here's sort of like how my view on the world changed, really. So I've been an atheist for as long as I can remember.
Since you were an atheist, I can safely assume that anyone can leave a comment on your video and have an open discussion with you. You must not have gotten the memo.
I went to a Church of England primary school, studied the Bible a little bit, prayed to God every day, but I prayed to God because it's what we had to do at the school. We did it in assembly, we sung hymns because we had to sing hymns, not because I sort of had any volition that God existed. And in fact, as soon as I left the Church of England school, I didn't pray anymore, didn't sing any hymns because I didn't have to, I wasn't told I had to, and I thought it was just sort of part of my school routine rather than an actual belief in God. So I moved on to a secular secondary school, and any existence of God that may have been lingering in my mind was gone, really. I took an active interest into science and became fascinated with it, really. I was really interested in biology. I did physics, and I think I suffered through chemistry, but regardless, I all found it all very interesting, like how the world sort of fit together.
Glad you like the science classes. I'm just wondering when you'll get to the part when you start believing in the magical sky fairies.
And in this interest in science, I ended up forming my opinion of atheism, that atheism was correct, that the existence of a God didn't fit with any scientific evidence that we have, really. Like many events in the Bible, such as Jesus feeding the 5,000 or Jesus coming back from the dead, didn't really have any scientific weight behind them, and I couldn't see how they would have come about. So I dismissed the idea of God existing entirely, and that's how I lived my life, and I was perfectly happy living my life like that. I mean, certainly there were some things even today that science can't explain, like how did life come about, what really sort of started the Big Bang. But I always had the belief in science that science would progress, and whilst we don't understand it now, one day we may be able to understand it, very much like human anatomy. 100, 200, 300 years ago, we didn't have anywhere near as much knowledge of the human body as we do now, and I very much had faith that science would do the same with the big questions in life that I have.
Just so we're clear, in this case you are using faith in terms of it based on the evidence that over the years our collective body of knowledge has grown and will continue to grow. Not the definition of faith being a belief in something without evidence, right?
And it wasn't just from a scientific viewpoint which I disagreed with the existence of God, it was also a philosophical one. So if we did have an all-loving God sort of watching over us, how could he allow suffering to exist? And very much sort of questions like that had me firmly entrenched in atheism, that science was correct, God was not correct, and there was no two ways about it, really. It didn't really need any more investigation on my part.
No more investigation on your part? If you apply that to science, you'll be bad at it. But luckily, by your title of your video, we know you're going to do it sometime. So can we get to that already? I'm doing nothing here but reminding the viewers I'm still here and making this video longer than it should be.
So all of this begs the question, really, what changed? You know, how did I go from staying up late watching YouTube videos of Richard Dawkins, having debates with theists and, in my opinion, wiping the floor with them, to converting from atheism to Christianity. So I study biomedical science at the University of Durham, and it was during the first few months of the year that I sort of realised just how intricately put together that we were. So you can have, well, even not just how intricately put together we are, how intricate the world is, really. Like,
Please don't say you convert to Christianity because life is too complex to form on its own. Someone must have had a designer. You just said you're studying biomedical science. Bio is as in biological. You have to take biology classes to understand that. That's why you should have covered how life got so complex.
you can have proteins made of thousands and thousands and thousands of amino acids, but you get that one glycine amino acid and swap it for another one, and all of a sudden the whole protein doesn't work. And such intricacy at like that small molecular level, I started entertaining the idea of intelligent design for the first time in my life.
Fuck. Well, at least I won't be sitting here doing nothing anymore. So let's get into it then. Even though the intelligent design idea has been debunked a number of times.
However, this wasn't really ideal. I lived my entire life as an atheist, not believing in God, and I'd probably say it goes as far as saying pitying Christians for their belief in God. I felt like at times maybe they'd been brainwashed, or they just had no self-assurance, and so I would go as far as say I pitied Christians for that.
Wait, are you yanking my chain here? Is this entire video just satire?
And to suddenly be entertaining the idea of Christianity, or just the existence of a God being true.
Nope, you are being very serious. Even though you're saying, or God being true, you are going with Christianity. I find it kind of convenient that you choose the one that you learn about in school, not Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, Scientology, or one of the other many religions. But I'm sure you're going to tell us how you looked into all of them before going with Christianity, won't you? Please tell me you are. Please.
That became quite inconvenient, sort of having lived my entire life one way to now all of a sudden potentially seeing the viewpoint of the people that I'd previously pitied. I didn't really want it to be true, so I pretty much stopped looking into it for a while. And then one night, about 3 weeks ago now, I was having a conversation with one of my best friends, Fiona, who is a Christian.
Let me guess. You became a Christian because of Fiona, right? What did she say to get you to think about becoming one?
We're having a deep, meaningful conversation into the early hours of the morning, and we started talking about the topic of like God and the way I see the world. And I've known Fiona for just over a year now, and I knew she was a Christian. I knew she was very, very strong in her beliefs, and she was very proud of them. So I never really talked to her about it, because being quite a cocksure, arrogant, almost, I'd go as far as saying arrogant in my beliefs, I didn't really want to talk to Fiona about Christianity and God, because in my mind I didn't want to make her doubt her faith, if that makes sense. In my arrogance, I was obviously thought as soon as we got into a conversation about it, I was going to convert her to atheism, and her faith was very important to her, so I never really wanted to have the conversation. And then we ended up having the conversation. I think I brought it up myself. I was talking about how I see other people's problems as more important than my own. And long story short, one thing led to another, and we started talking about God.
One thing led to another, and God cop-blocked again. I hate it when that happens.
And at first I was quite hesitant to get into the subject, because I didn't want, so I still had this idea that I was going to make Fiona doubt her faith, but I thought, well, we've started talking about it, let's be honest and open, and we'll sort of go from there.
Open and honest conversations are the best way to learn about someone else's point of view and to grow your current knowledge base. That's why I encourage your viewers to comment and discuss what you said in this video with you. Damn, forgot about that. Can't leave comments.
And then what happened was every single point that I made up, or I say made up, every single point that I made or brought forward, Fiona had a rebuttal to, but it wasn't just a, oh, well, God did it. There was a real sort of logical thought process that I couldn't just, like, understand how she'd come to that view. I could understand that that was probably a more logical view than mine.
Can we get an example of one of her arguments that didn't have God did it as the answer? I would like to hear it. I'm sure all the viewers would like to hear it as well. Also, did you try the simple switch out religions and see if her argument still makes sense? That's a pretty good way. Throw in Odin, Zeus, Allah, the Buddha. Also, does she give you any evidence that can be tested in controlled conditions? You know, the scientific method. The same.
And that was very scary. That sort of being so sure in what I believed to all of a sudden be perhaps doubting my own logic was really, it was quite terrifying, really. Sort of you believe one thing your entire life and all of a sudden your whole view of the world is starting to shift. That was a really terrifying moment.
You know what is also scary? Clowns and zombies. And if you add them together, you get fucking terrifying clown zombies. Clown zombies, people. Terrifying.
So I did what any sensible person would do, and I suppressed those feelings.
Yeah, because only sensible people suppress their feelings. Not like there is any potential backlash from that. A sensible person will look into Fiona's arguments more and make sure that they are worth their salt. But who am I to say what sensible people do? I'm making a video in response to something that most people don't even think needs one.
Yeah, I ignored them for several days because sort of having to change my view on the world would have been really inconvenient. So I decided that I wasn't going to investigate it, and then left it for a few days, and then concluded that would probably be very unscientific of me to not investigate every possible explanation for why we're here and what the world is here for.
By that you mean look at every claim equally and weigh them against what we see in reality, right? Not just going with the one religion you grew up learning about in primary school and the same one that your friend Fiona believes in.
So I started by looking into why atheists had converted to Christianity, and the prime example I'm going to use is C.S. Lewis. He was a devout atheist who, to quote, was dragged kicking and screaming into Christianity.
So note then, just going with the very first one you were presented with, I'm willing to bet my liver that if you grew up in a Jewish community, gone to a Jewish primary school, and your friend was Jewish, you'll make a video, Atheist to Jewish 1 of 3, and not look into any other religion that isn't investigating. You have to look into multiple possibilities first before going with one.
And I thought if I was ever going to end up converting, that's what I would end up being like. Not that I was sort of saying, oh, I'm going to be converted now and it's going to be like inevitable. It was more of I could see some of myself in him, and some of his views on the world I agreed with completely, and some of the questions he had, I was having those questions as well. For example, if there is no God and I'm the one who gives meaning to my own life, why are there things and thoughts and feelings that I'm having that I can't explain if I'm the one who's giving my life meaning, if that makes sense? And I'm not saying that was, oh yeah, I can't explain it, so that's God. It was more just that was one of the questions that cropped up.
When you give your life meaning and purpose, you don't get to pick and choose what emotions you feel. Your emotions are not something that can be controlled. You can try to limit them or push them aside, but they will just come back. They're annoying like that. Also, will you or someone please tell me what kind of meaning and purpose we get from the Christian God, for the record? And I say there is no meaning to life, and I give my own life purpose. But that is something for another video.
But I was still having major doubts at this point. Like, if God is all loving, how can suffering exist? Was perhaps one of the biggest questions that I had. So I looked into it, and I found the answer from, I don't remember who the talk was by, but there was a talk, and basically it sort of said, if God does exist and God allows us free will, by default suffering has to be allowed to occur.
No, it doesn't. Why can't God give us free will and no suffering? That will make for a much better world. But I get a feeling that you have more to say on this topic, so continue, sir.
If someone chooses of their own volition to inflict pain and suffering on someone else, to prevent that happening would be sort of messing with free will, really, and there would be no free will. So that was one of the explanations that I found for it.
Doesn't someone who inflicts harm and suffering on someone else interfere with that person's free will? So if God does or does not interfere, either way, one person's free will is being denied. Oh, thanks for making me dig around as you went through your backstory. Maybe next time you do that, I'll watch a panda video or something.
The other one I'm going to use is analogy. I really like analogies. I think they're a really good way of explaining things. So I'm going to use the analogy of a resistance fighter in World War II.
I hate allegories. When you're done, I'll show you why.
So say your town has been occupied in World War II, and you meet up with the local resistance leader, and you want to join the resistance movement, and you're sitting there, you're chatting to him for hours and hours and hours, and at the end he presses you and he says, right, do you want to sign up to the resistance movement? And you say yes, and he says okay. Then we can't be seen in public together again, we can't really communicate in public again, you can't ask me any questions, you know, to be seen together would be like we'd both be put to death, sort of thing. And then you see a few weeks later the same resistance fighter wearing Gestapo uniform arresting one of your resistance fighter colleagues. You're going to start asking questions about his methods, like, is he really on your side? So you see him drag your resistance fighter friend away, and you're sort of left shocked at what you've seen. But what you don't see around the corner is that out of your sight, he has let your resistance fighter friend go, and it's sort of like just the method that he was working at, if that makes sense. Again, you can sort of draw a parallel with, oh, God works in mysterious ways, and I'm not saying, oh, and that parable there was exactly why I sort of started believing in God, but it was just one concept, so I could get my head around how it all made sense.
Now, this is why I don't like allegories. I'll start at the end of yours. Around the corner, the resistant leaders let your friend go. Before parting ways, your friend hands the leader detailed plans and locations of all resistant members and civilians that are helping them. They both say Hail Hitler and go their separate ways. Later on, you and all the other resistance fighters are round up and with the Christians that help you. You're all tortured till the end of the war. Now, the difference between yours and mine is in your parable, God works in mysterious ways. In mine, God just wants to torture a whole lot of people.
And then I started looking into like the philosophical existence of God rather than a scientific one. So, for example, like secularism is very insistent on science, but yet, like, our deepest thoughts and feelings can't really be explained.
Yes, it can. It's called psychology. It's one of the soft sciences. You might want to look into it. Also, evolution has a role to play in as well, but I'm not going into it.
So people are, even myself, like, I would describe, someone said, like, why do we feel happiness? I would explain sort of like, oh, it's you know, your hormones, and all you're doing is detecting hormones that are making you happy. Realise that explains how we feel happy, but it doesn't explain why.
What's the fucking difference between the how and the why here? Why is a sky fairy need to explain this? How does a sky fairy even explain this?
Because science can't explain the why, it can explain the how. To use another analogy,
Fuck, not another one.
if I was to ask you why is the kettle boiling, you could say, oh, it's because the heat in the water molecules is causing them to vibrate more, and as they're moving around more, they gain enough kinetic energy to break the van der Waals forces between the water molecules and go from being a liquid to being a gas. But that explains how the kettle's boiling. It's warm. The reason why the kettle is boiling was because I wanted a cup of tea. And you would never have found that if you were just looking at a scientific point of view.
First off, you're using two different whys here. Why is the water boiling? Is the why that has a scientific reason for it, or the how. Why am I boiling water? Is that why that has your reason for boiling. Scientific why is equal to the how. Do you get that? Secondly, you don't give enough evidence or information. You just ask, why is the water boiling? So of course people will think you are using the scientific why, not your reason why. Thirdly, I could have said you wanted tea, but really you just wanted the water board made of boiling water. I say that because I hate allegories.
Again, to use another analogy,
You just want me to make more shit up with allegories, don't you? Seriously, three in one video?
if you set up a machine that detected visible light, so it only works between the wavelength of light, was about 300 to 750 nanometers, give or take some nanometers, and you shine your torch on it and you get a reading. Bang, your light's detected, happy days. Now I shine an infrared pen through the detector and nothing happens. Do you say that infrared light doesn't exist, or do you have to adjust the parameters of your machine to detect what you're currently not detecting? That's, again, not the crux of how I ended up arriving here. It's just another point that sort of added weight.
You know what? I'm not going to bother with this one. Viewers, you make up your own version of this one and put it in the comment section below.
So I went to a talk by Professor Chris Dunn, who is an astrophysicist at Durham University, and she gave a talk on how her religious beliefs and her scientific knowledge don't actually conflict with one another. Again, to go back to the kettle analogy, the science explains the how, but it doesn't explain the why. And that got me sort of really thinking about how I'd been perceiving the world.
Thanks, Chris, for giving me an idea for a future episode, the 2 whys. I'll send you a link to it when I make it, if I remember to. Well, everybody, that was Atheist to Christian 1 of 3. Hope you enjoy my first video. If you want me to do the other 2 parts, let me know, or I'll do them anyways. This is my channel. I can do whatever I want. Till then, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and let me know what I can do better. This is my first video after all. See you later.